Elaine, would you like to unmute? We're going to hear from Elaine today.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yep.
Great. Okay, this is entitled Just Leave, but Leave Clean. So it comes from Isaiah 52 in the Message, which we'll look at later on. So we moved house in the early weeks of lockdown, and it was a surprise to many people, to us a bit too. But for me, the decision had been a year in the making. For months, I'd wondered about the restlessness in my spirit. I had a vague idea that it could involve moving house. So I just kept asking God. John and I discussed it at length, and we decided we had no logical reason to move. Our house was big enough for our family to come and stay. We had a great view. We loved the garden, which had boulders and lots of native plants. So this year began with God firmly encouraging me to be sensitive to his leading. By March, God was making it clear he was bringing something new into my life. And he did it with these words in Isaiah 43, 18 to 19. This is what God says. Be alert, be present. I'm about to do something brand new. It's bursting out. Don't you see it? There it is. I'm making a road through the desert, rivers in the Badlands. As I continued to seek God through this restless time, he continued to encourage me. I will direct your path by my word and by my spirit. There's a stirring and dissatisfaction within you. You want more of me. You cannot return to the old ways. You cannot go back. Move into the new thing I'm doing. God then highlighted these verses that we're going to look at in depth today. So Chrissy, if we could put up Isaiah 52, 11 to 12 in the Message. Thanks. Out of here, leave this place. Don't look back. Don't contaminate yourselves with plunder. Just leave, but leave clean. Purify yourselves in the process of worship, carrying the holy vessels of God. But you don't have to be in a hurry. You're not running from anybody. God is leading you out of here. And the God of Israel is also your rear guard. Thanks, Chrissy. So in these verses, God's preparing the Israelites to move out of Babylon. And as I read Isaiah 52 and meditated on it, I was prompted to ask God, are you preparing me to leave and move into the new thing you're doing? Today, I'd like to encourage you also to ask God, are you preparing me to leave a place where I've become settled? Is it a physical place, a spiritual place? For me, it was both. Over the 70 years of captivity in Babylon, the Israelites would have taken on aspects of Babylonian culture. It's interesting that God prepared the Israelites by describing how they were to leave. Leave this place. Don't look back. Don't contaminate yourselves with plunder. Isaiah warns Israel to make a clean break and leave behind the things of Babylon, physically and spiritually. Just leave, but leave clean. Like Israel, God offers us new beginnings. But what plunder from the world do we want to carry with us? Let's have a quick look at the current attitudes of the culture around us. Before this lockdown in New South Wales, we were complacent about COVID-19. We felt frustrated and inconvenienced when COVID restrictions reshaped our lives. Then fear entered the equation when we accepted that the Delta variant could harm us. Fear has led to anger and offence, influencing our treatment of others. As God's people, He invites us to leave behind the world's attitudes, to leave clean. As I physically left our house on the hill, I wondered what attitudes God was calling me to leave behind. It soon became clear that He was encouraging me to see people through His eyes. He's leading me out of a habit of labeling people, which can lead to judgment. He wants to form in me a new set of eyes, a new way of looking at people. I was reading a passage in this book. It's called A Glorious Dark by A.J. Swoboda. And I'll read it out to you. It really touched me when God was taking me through this. What if we saw as Jesus saw? What if we imagined as Jesus imagined? Jean Vanier left an academic life as a professor to move into a small house with mentally challenged friends called L'Arche. Vanier was reportedly once asked by a journalist why he chose to live among the disabled. He stared blankly at her, unclear how to respond. The reporter asked him again, "Why do you live among the disabled?" And then the third time, she did it very loudly, thinking he might have a hearing problem. Suddenly, Vanier replied, "Oh, wait, are you talking about my friend Susan?" A Christian doesn't see a disabled person. A Christian sees a friend with a name. In Portland, my friend Luke works with an organisation that prepares meals for those who live outside. The organisation doesn't call these people homeless people. They lovingly call them, quite simply, friends. And the people in the organisation have many friends. Some of them live inside and some of them live outside. A Christian doesn't see homeless people. A Christian sees friends and eats with them. One time I sat in front of a coffee shop in Portland. Two lesbians walked by holding hands. I was immediately caught off guard, not by them holding hands, but by the fact that I saw two lesbians holding hands. Funny how I do that, seeing lesbians walk by rather than human beings. A Christian doesn't merely see lesbians walking down the street. A Christian sees human beings walking down the street. There were so many aspects of that that touched me at the time and still do in the way that God's convicting me about labeling people. So on the day we moved into the granny flat, so we have an old cottage at the front that we're going to knock down. So we've moved into the granny flat at the back. So my desire to leave that old place of labeling and judging was greatly tested. We discovered that the guy living in the next granny flat is well known and well heard around the neighborhood for making very loud phone calls outside while using a colorful turn of phrase, as my father-in-law would say. These loud, colorful phone calls occurred several times on that first day, virtually back to back. My first impulse was to be angry and frustrated, and my second was to label and judge him. I quickly recalled how our neighbour up on the hill had warned us about those future neighbours down on the flat. I could sense I was in real danger of returning to my old place of thinking. I thought back to those words in this book. I was reminded that Jesus was very inclusive in the way he treated people. He looked at them as his neighbour and encouraged his followers to do the same. A neighbour includes rather than excludes others. As neighbours, we include others into the holy space that we share with God through our hospitality, through our words, actions, and prayers. As I allow God to lead me out of my old place of thinking, he's helping me to see my neighbour with a new set of eyes, the eyes of Jesus, who died on the cross for all of us. So my problem in the midst of all this is, and was, and probably will be for ongoing, how do we leave clean and stay clean? Isaiah 52:12 gave me some answers. Purify yourself in the process of worship, carrying the holy vessels of God. As we worship, we magnify God, glorifying and delighting in who he is. As we recognize and proclaim God's holiness, we desire to become more like God. Chrissy, if we can have the 1 Peter 2 now, thanks. In 1 Peter 2, 9, 11, 12, in the Easy Read version, that you are his chosen people, the king's priests. You are a holy nation, a people belonging to God. So I beg you to keep your lives free from the evil things you want to do, those desires that fight against your true selves. People who don't believe are living all around you. They may say that you are doing wrong. So live such good lives that they will see the good you do, and they will give glory to God on the day he comes. Thank you. As we enter God's holy presence in worship as his priests, he calls us to leave behind the world's attitudes, to leave clean. God purifies us through worship and then enables us to represent God to others. Verse 12 also gave me a really good reminder. But you don't have to be in a hurry. You're not running from anybody. God is leading you out of here. And the God of Israel is also your rear guard. God is the one who leads us out of the old place, and we follow him into the new place. As we allow God to lead us, we begin to see people and circumstances from his perspective. It's also really encouraging to me that the God of Israel promises to be our rear guard. As we follow his lead into new places, we know that he's got our backs. As we leave and leave clean, we can trust that Jesus has got our back covered. with his robe of righteousness. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. That was great. Thank you so much. Lots to think about there.
Marilyn,
yes.
can I just share something which I think really ties in so perfectly with what Elaine shared right now?
Yep, sure.
Before she spoke, I didn't have a clue what Elaine was going to speak on, but before she spoke, I was just thinking back to a dream that I'd had, maybe 18 months, 2 years ago, and I'd shared it with Chrissy one night when she came for dinner. And then I shared it one morning in church when Nigel Elliott came with his worship team. And I think it speaks to us individually and as a church this morning, because I'll explain the dream and then how it all fits. In the dream, Sue and I were invited to a function, and I really felt it was like the room we used to meet in at Pacific Gardens. It was so much like it. And so we had a table in the function for us to go to. And so there were people already in there, and they were seated at the tables, and there were also people milling around the table. So Sue and I arrived, and I sort of went in first, and I couldn't find our table because it was crowded out. It was just totally full. And so just as that was happening, Joni Mitchell came in, and there was like a dance floor area, and she came in with her guitar and speakers, and she set up to play, but she set up so she had her back to everyone in the room, and she was going to string to the open area. And so I moved into that area, and then Sue came into the room, and I called her over, and that was the end of the dream. When I shared that at the morning of the when Nigel came, I felt that during our worship time at church that morning, the worship had actually taken us across into that dance floor area. And that's what it says in what Elaine read out, because it says, just leave, but leave clean. Purify yourselves in the process of worship. So we were leaving this other area of seated and stuff into this new space, but the worship was actually taking us in there. And I'd never seen that before. And it really, I think it speaks to, the dream fits with the message, and it speaks to our church. Our worship, our love for the Lord is going to take us into whatever place he has for us, be it a building or where we are just spiritually as a church. It could be both. But I was just pondering that dream before Elaine even spoke, and I thought, I don't even know why I'm thinking about it. But yeah. And just one more thing quickly. We went to the Philippines a few years ago on a mission trip, and we went to a university, and the women on the team spoke to the girls in the uni, and we went down as men to speak to the men. And as the men came into the room where we had the men's meeting, a guy came in who looked extremely gay, so obviously gay, and the Lord convicted me, and he said, I want you to go up and tell him that I love him. And I had, when he came in, I went up and did what the Lord prompted me to do. And I just felt that tied in with what you were reading as well. So praise the Lord.
Yes, I felt that too. Thanks for that. That's really great, Noel. I felt that as you're preaching too, Elaine, that's got a bigger context than just your, what you, for your life. I think it's for all of us and for the church. I would agree. Yeah, thank you, both of you. That's great.